What happens when the only person who can save your mother is the one man you swore you'd never see again? Zara Thompson's hands shook as she stared at the medical invoice on her phone screen, the numbers blurring together like they were mocking her. $250,000. Stage 4 cervical cancer doesn't wait for payment plans, doesn't care that her mother Winifred spent 20 years cleaning office buildings in Lakeview so Zara could have dance lessons, doesn't pause while you figure out which organ you can sell on the black market to keep your last living parent breathing. The fluorescent lights above Zara's dressing room mirror at Club Azur on West Division Street hummed with the kind of frequency that burrows into your skull and sets up camp, and she could hear the bass from the main floor vibrating through the walls, a steady pulse that used to make her feel alive, but now just reminded her that time was slipping away faster than she could count it. She had 3 weeks, maybe 4 if the doctors were feeling generous with their prognosis, but generosity and terminal diagnosis don't usually share the same sentence. Zara's reflections stared back at her with eyes that looked 10 years older than 26, brown skin pulled tight over cheekbones that were sharper now because eating felt like a luxury she couldn't afford when every spare dollar went toward treatments that weren't working. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus, her manager at the club, had forwarded another message from the private booking inquiry that had come through last week, the one she'd ignored twice already, because private bookings in Chicago meant men with too much money and not enough boundaries, meant hotel suites with locked doors, and negotiations that started with dancing and ended with things she'd spent her entire career refusing. But the number Marcus kept mentioning made her fingers hover over the reply button. $75,000 for one night, one performance. No contact, the message promised, just dancing for a private event at an undisclosed location on the Magnificent Mile. If you've made it this far into this story and you're already feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down on you, hit that like button and subscribe, because what Zara's about to walk into will test every boundary you thought you had. The thing about desperation is it makes you see doors where there used to be walls, makes you step through them even when every instinct screams that the floor on the other side might not exist. Zara had danced professionally since she was 19, worked her way up from Southside showcases to becoming Club Azur's headliner, the girl whose Friday night performances packed the place so tight the fire marshal had shown up twice. She knew her worth. She also knew $75,000 was 3 times what any legitimate booking would offer, which meant this wasn't legitimate, which meant she was about to make a choice that would carve a line through her life, dividing it into before and after. She replied to Marcus with a single word: yes. The response came back in under a minute with an address, a time, and a single instruction that made her stomach twist. Wear red. Nothing else. Just wear red. The building on East Walton Street looked like every other luxury high-rise in the area, all glass and steel and the kind of quiet money that doesn't need to announce itself because everyone already knows it's there. Zara stood outside the service entrance at 11:47 on a Thursday night, her long black coat pulled tight even though it was early September and still warm, her heels clicking against concrete as she shifted her weight from foot to foot. The red dress underneath was simple, no sequins or excess fabric, just a slip of silk that moved like water and cost her 2 weeks of tips to buy, because if she was going to sell pieces of her dignity, she was going to look like art doing it. The door opened before she could knock. A man in his 50s with a face that suggested he'd spent considerable time deciding who lived and who didn't, gestured her inside without speaking, and Zara followed because turning back now would mean watching her mother die in a hospital bed in Evanston while she explained she'd had a chance to save her but chickened out. They walked through maintenance corridors that smelled like industrial cleaner and old concrete, took a service elevator up 12 floors, emerged into a hallway that suddenly looked like it belonged in a different building entirely, all dark wood paneling and art that probably cost more than her mother's entire medical bill. The man stopped at a door, placed his hand on her shoulder with just enough pressure to make it clear this was a warning disguised as guidance, and said 4 words in an accent she couldn't place. "Don't look at him." Then he opened the door and the sound of conversation in Korean spilled out like smoke, low voices and the clink of glasses, and underneath it all, a tension so thick Zara could taste it on her tongue, metallic and sharp. The room was designed for gatherings that required discretion. No windows, soundproofed walls, furniture arranged in a semicircle facing a space in the center that was clearly meant for her. 12 men occupied the room, most of them older than her father would have been if he hadn't died in a construction accident when she was 11, all of them dressed in suits that whispered money so old it had stopped keeping track of itself. They stopped talking when she entered. Every single one of them turned to look at her, except one. He sat in the center of the arc, furthest from the door, a man who couldn't have been much past 30 with the kind of face that fashion photographers would kill to capture. Sharp angles and full lips, and eyes so dark they looked black in the dim lighting. He was staring at his hands, folded in his lap, and something about the deliberate way he wasn't looking at her made Zara's pulse spike, because that's not how men usually reacted when she walked into a room wearing red silk. The man who'd escorted her upstairs gestured toward the center space. She understood. The music started without warning, something instrumental and slow that didn't match her usual repertoire, but she'd been dancing long enough to adapt to anything. Zara let the coat slide off her shoulders, and the collective intake of breath from 11 men would have been flattering under different circumstances, but right now it just felt like being appraised, like standing on an auction block waiting for the bidding to start. She began to move. Dance had always been the place where Zara could translate everything words couldn't hold, every ounce of rage at a world that killed people with medical bills, every drop of fear that she'd lose her mother the same way she'd lost her father, every shred of hope that maybe tomorrow would be different, even though tomorrow had been letting her down for years. The silk moved with her body like a second skin, and she poured 6 years of professional training and 26 years of survival into 4 minutes of movement that made the room forget to breathe. She spun, dropped low, arched her back, let her hair fall across her face, and through it all she didn't look at him, the one man who wasn't watching her the way the others were, the one man whose absolute stillness felt louder than applause. When the music stopped, she held her final pose for 3 seconds, breathing hard, then straightened and reached for her coat. That's when he stood. Joon Ho moved like water flows downhill, inevitable and smooth and completely certain of where it's going. He crossed the space between them before anyone else could react, and when he got close enough that Zara could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy with an undertone of smoke, he finally looked at her. Recognition hit her like a fist to the sternum. She knew this face. She knew those eyes. 7 years ago, before Club Asia, before her mother's diagnosis, before everything got complicated and broke, Zara had been a junior at DePaul University studying business administration because her mother insisted she needed something to fall back on if dance didn't work out. She'd been performing weekends at a small venue in Lincoln Park, nothing fancy, just a showcase for local artists trying to build their portfolios. He'd been in the audience 3 nights in a row, always alone, always in the back corner, and on the 4th night he'd waited until everyone else left and introduced himself as Joon, just Joon, a grad student studying international relations. They'd gone for coffee at 3 in the morning because nothing else was open and talked until sunrise about what it meant to exist between worlds. Him as a Korean man trying to navigate American expectations, while his family back in Seoul sent letters reminding him who he was supposed to be. Her as a black woman whose mother came from Nigeria and whose father had been born in Mississippi and who'd grown up in a Chicago that kept trying to put her in boxes she didn't fit. They'd seen each other for 6 months, not dating exactly, more like 2 people who understood what it felt like to be pulled in opposite directions, finding temporary shelter in each other's company. Then one night he'd shown up at her dorm with blood on his shirt collar and eyes that looked like they'd seen something they couldn't unsee, and he told her she needed to forget him, needed to act like they'd never met, needed to understand that his family's business wasn't international relations, and if she was smart, she'd transfer schools and change her phone number. She'd asked him what kind of business. He'd said the kind that protects its own. Then he'd disappeared. 7 years. 7 years, and now he was standing in front of her in a room full of men who deferred to him like gravity, and Zara's brain was trying to reconcile the boy who'd recited Yeats' poetry in a coffee shop at 4 in the morning with the man whose presence made hardened criminals sit straighter in their chairs. Z, he said, and no one had called her that in years. That nickname had died with whatever they'd had, and the way it sounded in his voice, low and careful, like he was handling something explosive, made her want to run and stay in equal measure. I didn't know you'd be the one they hired. His English was still perfect, barely accented, but there was something underneath it now, an edge that hadn't been there before. You need to leave. One of the older men, silver-haired and wearing a watch that cost more than Zara's car, said something sharp in Korean. Joon Ho replied without looking away from her, his tone flat and final. More Korean followed, heated this time, and Zara's limited knowledge of the language only caught fragments, but she heard enough. The word for money, the word for debt, the word that sounded like her mother's name pronounced with an unfamiliar accent. "What did you just say about my mother?" Zara said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt, came out like she wasn't standing in a room full of dangerous men wearing nothing but red silk and audacity. Joon Ho's jaw tightened. The silver-haired man stood, moved toward Zara with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his life, and pulled out his phone. He turned the screen toward her. The photo showed her mother outside Northwestern Memorial Hospital, taken yesterday based on the clothes Winifred was wearing, the yellow cardigan Zara had bought her last Christmas. The man scrolled. Another photo. Her mother's apartment building in Evanston. Another. Her mother sitting in the chemotherapy chair, IV in her arm, exhausted and small in a way that made Zara's chest constrict. "We know you need money," the man said, his accented clear but clear. "We know about the bills. We know about the cancer. We are prepared to help." Zara's mind raced through calculations she didn't want to make. How much? All of it. The room went silent. The full treatment cost, hospital bills, medication, everything required to give your mother a chance, in exchange for a simple arrangement. This was the moment. This was where Zara could walk away, tell them to go to hell, figure out another way that didn't involve men with photos of her dying mother and offers that came wrapped in threat-shaped paper. But there was no other way. She'd spent 3 months learning that in exquisite detail. Every bank that turned down her loan application, every fundraiser that barely scraped together a few $1,000s, every night she'd lain awake doing math that never added up. "What arrangement?" she said, even though she already knew the answer would cost her more than money. The silver-haired man looked at Joon Ho and spoke in rapid Korean. Joon Ho's response was sharp, final, the kind of tone that ends arguments, but the older man persisted, gesturing at Zara like she was merchandise they were negotiating over. Other voices joined in, a debate that clearly had nothing to do with her input and everything to do with her existence. Zara stood there, still in her performance pose, and watched the hierarchy of power play out in real time. Joon Ho was clearly in charge, but not absolutely, clearly respected but without challenge, and the way the older man kept gesturing between him and Zara suggested they knew exactly what they were leveraging. Finally, Joon Ho held up one hand, and the room went silent. He turned to Zara, and the look on his face was the same one he'd worn 7 years ago, when he'd told her to forget him, resignation and fury, and something that might have been regret if you squinted. "My organization is expanding operations in the Midwest. We need legitimacy, business fronts that look clean. You're going to help us build that. You'll be seen with me publicly, at events, restaurants, galas, anywhere we need to establish a certain image. You want me to be your fake girlfriend?" Zara said, and the absurdity of it almost made her laugh, except nothing about this was funny. "No, I want you to be my fiancé." The word landed like a grenade. "You're insane." "I'm practical. The FBI has been watching our financial transactions for 8 months. They're looking for patterns, unusual expenditures. Your mother's medical bills suddenly being paid off by an anonymous donor would trigger every flag they have. But if you're my fiancé, if we're planning a wedding, if money flows between families the way it does in legitimate relationships, it becomes invisible. Just a man taking care of his future wife's family. Nothing illegal, nothing to investigate. Zara's mind moved like ice cracking, fracturing in every direction. And what happens when the FBI realizes we barely know each other, when they check our history and find nothing? They'll find 7 years of social media posts I've had prepared since yesterday. They'll find photos of us together, dates stamp-popped, locations verified. They'll find a narrative that explains why we kept the relationship quiet, something about your mother's traditionalist views and my family's business concerns requiring discretion. They'll find exactly what they expect to find. The level of premeditation made Zara's skin crawl. You knew I'd be here tonight. I knew someone would accept the booking. I've had people monitoring your mother's situation for 6 months. The moment you became desperate enough, I knew you'd surface. I didn't know it would be you specifically until you walked through that door. 6 months. He'd been watching her life fall apart for 6 months and hadn't said a word, hadn't offered help, hadn't done anything except wait for her to become desperate enough to exploit. The rage that rose up in Zara's throat tasted like battery acid. And if I say no? The silver-haired man smiled, and it was the kind of smile that preceded acts of violence. Then your mother dies, slowly, painfully, and you get to watch it happen knowing you could have saved her. Joon Ho said something harsh in Korean, but the older man waved him off. This was clearly a negotiation tactic they'd used before. Good cop, bad cop, except both cops were criminals and the person caught in the middle had no good options. Zara looked at Joon Ho, really looked at him, trying to find any trace of the boy who'd held her hand in a coffee shop and talked about poetry and belonging. He stared back with eyes that had learned how to be empty. How long? 6 months minimum. Long enough to establish the relationship credibly, long enough for the FBI to lose interest, long enough for money to move through channels they can't trace. And then you walk away. Your mother gets her treatment, you get your life back, we get our legitimacy. Everyone wins. Except winning looked like participating in an elaborate fraud, lying to federal investigators, and pretending to love a man who'd orchestrated her desperation. Winning looked like becoming complicit in whatever criminal enterprise required this level of theatrical deception. Winning looked like losing every shred of integrity she'd spent 26 years building. If you're sitting there thinking about what you'd do in Zara's position, about whether saving your mother justifies becoming entangled with people who photograph dying women as leverage, drop a comment below because this story is about to test every moral boundary you have, and I want to know where you stand. Zara thought about her mother, teaching her to read using library books because they couldn't afford to buy them. Thought about her mother working double shifts so Zara could go to that fancy dance intensive in New York the summer she turned 14. Thought about her mother's face when the doctor said stage 4, the way all the color had drained out of it like someone had pulled a plug. Thought about what it would mean to watch that woman die because Zara had principles. I want it in writing, Zara said, and her voice didn't shake even though everything inside her was shaking. Every dollar accounted for, contracts that specify exactly what I'm agreeing to, protection guarantees for my mother, and I want her moved to a better facility tomorrow, not next week, not when it's convenient, tomorrow, with the best oncologist money can buy. The silver-haired man laughed. Actually laughed like she'd told a joke. Joon Ho silenced in with a look that could have frozen magma. Done, Joon Ho said. Anything else? Yeah, I want to know why. Why you disappeared 7 years ago. Why you've been watching me for 6 months. Why you're doing this when you could hire any woman in Chicago to play this role. Something flickered across Joon Ho's face, there and gone so fast she almost missed it. Because you're the only one I trust not to fall apart when this gets complicated, and it will get complicated. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the scar above his left eyebrow that hadn't been there 7 years ago, close enough that she could count the beats between his breaths. Because I made a mistake letting you go the first time, and I'm not capable of making good decisions where you're concerned. Because every man in this room thinks you're a tool we can use and discard, and I need them to believe I think that too. But the truth is, I've been looking for a reason to see you again since the night I walked away, and I'm selfish enough to use your mother's illness to make that happen. You want honesty, Z? There it is. I'm not the good guy in this story. I stopped being him a long time ago. The confession hung in the air like smoke, and Zara didn't know which was worse, the manipulation or the raw honesty about the manipulation. Don't call me Z. You lost that right. What should I call you then? Whatever fake fiancés call their fake fiancés. Nothing real. Joon Ho nodded slowly, something that might have been hurt crossing his features if you believed men like him could still feel hurt. Understood. The lawyers will have contracts ready by morning. A car will pick you up at your apartment tomorrow at 9. Bring your mother's medical records, insurance information, everything. We'll handle the facility transfer. What about tonight, the $75,000 I was promised for performing? Consider it a signing bonus. He gestured to one of the men near the door, said something in Korean. The man left and returned 2 minutes later with a metal briefcase. He placed it on the table, opened it to reveal stacks of bills so neatly organized they looked fake. This is twice what we agreed. The rest is to make sure you understand we're serious. Zara stared at the money, $150,000 in cash just sitting there, enough to buy 6 more months of her mother's time even without the full arrangement, enough to make her realize exactly how much they'd been willing to pay, which meant they needed this more than they were letting on, which meant she had more leverage than they wanted her to know. She picked up the briefcase. I'm keeping this regardless of whether I signed your contracts tomorrow. Consider it insurance that you'll actually follow through. The silver-haired man started to object, but Joon Ho cut him off with 2 words in Korean. The man subsided, but the look he gave Zara promised that keeping that money would have consequences, that she just made an enemy of someone who collected enemies the way other people collected stamps. Zara met his stare without blinking. She'd grown up in Southside Chicago and had learned how to navigate dangerous men before she learned algebra, and if he thought a hard look is enough to intimidate her, he'd clearly never met a woman with a dying mother and nothing left to lose. The car tomorrow, 9 sharp. Don't be late. Or what, you'll kill my mother anyway? No. I'll assume you've decided to walk away, and I'll respect that decision, but the men in this room won't, and I can't protect you from them if you're not under my protection officially. The threat was clear. Sign the contracts or become a target. Save your mother by selling yourself or watch both of you disappear. Choose between impossible and worse. Zara walked toward the door, briefcase in hand, coat thrown over her shoulders. She made it 3 steps before Joon Ho spoke again. I'm sorry, for what it's worth. I'm sorry it came to this. She didn't turn around. No, you're not. You orchestrated this. You created this situation. You don't get to apologize for it. She left before he could respond, followed the silent escort back through the service corridors, emerged onto East Walton Street, where the night air felt like breathing again after being underwater. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. 1 sentence. The boy who loved poetry died the night I told you to forget me. The man who's left isn't capable of love, but he keeps you safe. It will have to be enough. Zara deleted the message, hailed a cab, and rode back to her apartment in Ukrainian Village with a briefcase full of blood money and a decision that had already been made the moment she walked into that room. She'd save her mother. She'd play the role. She'd become whoever Joon Ho needed her to be in public while keeping every piece of herself locked away where he couldn't touch it. And when 6 months were over, she'd walk away and never look back. That was the plan. The problem with plans is they assume you have control, assume the people you're dealing with play by the rules you've agreed to, assume nothing unexpected happens to shatter the carefully constructed fiction. 3 things happened before morning that destroyed every assumption Zara had made. First, at 2:17 in the morning, while Zara was sitting on her apartment floor counting $100 bills like they were rosary beads, her phone rang. Northwestern Memorial Hospital. They'd stabilized her mother after a sudden respiratory crisis, and she was asking for Zara, needed her there immediately, and the nurse's voice carried an urgency that made Zara abandon the money and run for the door. She made it to Evanston in 18 minutes, breaking every speed limit, and found her mother awake awake, but barely, oxygen mask covering her face, monitors beeping their arrhythmic song of impending mortality. Winifred Thompson looked at her daughter with eyes that still held clarity despite the pain medication and morphine drip, and she said 5 words that changed everything. "I know what you did." Zara's stomach dropped into her shoes. Her mother gestured weakly for the oxygen mask to be removed. The nurse obliged. Winifred's voice came out raspy and thin, but determined. "A man came to see me tonight. Korean, expensive suit. He told me someone was paying for my treatment. He told me it was you. He told me what you'd have to do to make that happen." Joon Ho, that manipulative son of a bitch, had gone to see her mother, had told her just enough truth wrapped in lies to make sure Winifred would push Zara toward accepting the arrangement. "Mama, I can explain." "No, you listen." Winifred grabbed Zara's hand with strength that shouldn't have been possible in her condition. "I didn't survive coming to this country with nothing, didn't work my fingers to bone for 20 years, didn't raise you to be strong and smart and beautiful just so you could sell yourself to save me. I'm dying. That's not your fault. That's not something you fix by destroying your life." Tears ran down Zara's face unchecked. "I'm not letting you die when I can stop it. Baby, some things cost more than money. Whatever that man is asking of you, whatever you think you have to do, it will take pieces of you that don't grow back. I've seen it. Your father's mother, back in Mississippi, she made that same choice once, sold herself to men with power to keep her family fed during the Depression. It ate her alive from the inside. By the time I met her, she was a ghost wearing skin. I won't watch that happen to you. It's just 6 months, just pretending. I can handle it. That's what everyone thinks, that they can play the game and not get played. But men like that, they don't make deals they can't win. If he's offering to save me, it's because he wants something more valuable than the money it costs him." Winifred coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made the monitors spike. The nurse moved to put the oxygen mask back on, but Winifred waved her off. Promise me you'll walk away from whatever this is." Zara couldn't make that promise, couldn't even pretend to make it. Her mother saw the refusal in her silence, and something crumbled in her expression, disappointment and resignation mixing into an emotion that had no name. "Then at least promise me you'll remember who you are when it's over. Don't let him take that." "I promise." It was the only truth Zara had left. Second, at 4:30 in the morning, while Zara was driving back to her apartment after watching her mother fall back asleep, exhausted from effort and emotion, a black SUV pulled up beside her at a red light on Michigan Avenue. The window rolled down. A woman in her 40s, black, professional, wearing a blazer despite the hour, held up FBI credentials. "Special Agent Simmons." "Zara Thompson, pull over at the next available space. We need to talk." Zara's heart rate doubled. She pulled into a 24-hour parking garage, the SUV following like a shadow. Agent Simmons got out, gestured for Zara to do the same. They stood in the fluorescent brightness of level 3, 2 women having a conversation that would determine whether Zara's immediate future included federal prison. "I'm going to be direct because it's late and I'm tired, and you strike me as someone who appreciates honesty. We know about the booking tonight. We know who you performed for. We know they paid you $150,000. We also know about your mother's medical situation, and I'm genuinely sorry you're dealing with that. But here's the thing. The organization you just danced for is responsible for trafficking operations across 5 states, money laundering that supports cartels in 3 countries, and at least 6 murders we can prove if we could ever get witnesses to testify. Kim Joon Ho is the youngest syndicate leader in their history, and the most dangerous because he's smart and patient and willing to burn everything down to protect what's his. Whatever he offered you tonight, whatever arrangement he proposed, I'm here to offer you a better deal. Zara's mind raced. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult either of us. You walked out of that building carrying a briefcase full of cash. We had thermal imaging on the room. 12 men and 1 woman. We know what happened. What we don't know is what you agreed to. So I'm offering you a chance to tell me before you're too deep to save yourself. Agent Simmons pulled out a tablet, showed Zara photos, crime scenes, bodies, financial records with numbers that made the $150,000 look like pocket change. He's not a businessman, he's not misunderstood, he's a criminal who's very good at making people think he's something else, and whatever fantasy he sold you about playing a role and walking away after 6 months is exactly that, a fantasy. People who get close to Joon Ho end up dead or in prison or both. Help us build a case and we'll protect you and your mother. Witness protection, new identities, full medical coverage for her treatment. You never have to see him again. It was the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice that would let Zara sleep at night knowing she'd done the right thing. So why did her hand hover over the briefcase of money like she was protecting it instead of handing it over as evidence? I need time to think about this. You have until 9 tomorrow morning. That's when he's sending a car for you, isn't it? Make the right choice, Zara. Choose survival over sacrifice. Choose yourself. Agent Simmons handed Zara a card with a phone number. This line is secure. Call me before that car arrives, or don't and live with the consequences. She got back in the SUV and drove away, leaving Zara standing in a parking garage at 5 in the morning, holding blood money and a business card and the weight of 2 impossible choices. Third, at 6:45, while Zara was in her apartment trying to convince herself to call Agent Simmons, trying to find the courage to save herself the way her mother had begged her to, there was a knock at her door. She checked the peephole. Empty hallway. She opened the door anyway because fear and exhaustion make you stupid. An envelope sat on the floor, thick and cream-colored, her name written across it in handwriting that looked like calligraphy. She brought it inside, opened it. A contract, 20 pages of legal language that spelled out the arrangement in precise detail, her obligations, his obligations, financial guarantees, termination clauses, everything she'd demanded in writing. Attached to the front page with a paperclip was a handwritten note. Your mother's transfer to Rush University Medical Center is confirmed at 8:30 this morning. Dr. Sarah Chen, best oncologist in the country, will be leading her care team. First round of treatment starts this afternoon using a new immunotherapy protocol with a 73% success rate for her specific cancer type. All costs covered in perpetuity, regardless of whether you sign this contract. Consider it a gift, but know that the men I work with won't see it that way. They'll see it as a debt, and they collect debts with interest. The car comes at 9. Bring the contract signed or don't. Either way, your mother gets her treatment, but only one choice keeps both of you alive. There was a second page underneath. Photos. The silver-haired man from last night standing outside Zara's building, time-stamped 45 minutes ago. Another photo. The same man outside Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Another. Outside her mother's apartment in Evanston. The message was indisputable. They were watching. They would always be watching. Signing the contract wouldn't save her. Not signing the contract wouldn't save her. Joon Ho had just given her mother the treatment anyway, which meant he'd eliminated her bargaining position, which meant the choice was never really a choice at all. Subscribe now if you want to see how Zara survives what's coming next, because this story is about to spiral into territory where love and obsession become indistinguishable, and the only way out is through. Zara sat on her floor with the contract and the money and Agent Simmons' card, and 3 hours until the car arrived. Her phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Her mother was being transferred as promised. Another text from Joon Ho's number. The poetry boy loved you. The criminal needs you. Both versions will destroy themselves to keep you breathing. The question isn't whether you sign, it's whether you survive what comes after you do. She picked up a pen. But when the only choice that saves your mother is the one that guarantees you'll lose yourself, is salvation really saving anything at all?